Wild and Woolly Ozarks, episode number 18, Show Me Murder with Michael Lear. Gather up the kids and the old folks. Shut down the contraptions and dim the lights. Put away your pocket-sized magic lantern shows. Close your eyes and listen. It's time to strike off on the paths less traveled, down dark trails through the hills and hollers, along the riverbanks and into the brush. Hear tales of things forgotten get told. Join me as we venture into the wild and woolly Ozarks. I'm your native guide and host, Champ Heron. Welcome back, gentle people. Thank you for once again finding your way to our fireside. Pull up a chair and rest yourself. I don't think we're going to need a fire too much longer. I've built a couple with rain just to dry the house out, but other than that, everything's pretty well right on here in our cabin. So if you haven't subscribed, followed, or joined, or made any other public declaration of support, please do so now. It helps us, and it helps us get better. It helps us grow, and it helps us to upgrade the podcast. I think you may have noticed some of our recent additions and bring you excellent guests like today's visit with Michael Lear. To all of our friends and neighbors who tell me they love the podcast and suggest topics and guests, thank you all kindly. You're the best. Have something to share? Be sure and drop us a line at WildIn, that's WildIn Woolly, WOOLLY, Ozarks at gmail.com. Today's guest is someone who I found on Spotify. Kind of funny to find people on Spotify, because in order to meet someone you find on Spotify, you have to track them down through social media and the internet, and it didn't take too awful long, and then you've got to stalk a person like Michael Lear for some time and try to get him on your podcast. It was right after we had just started and we had nothing up, and I tried to spear Michael Lear. To no avail until this evening. I am talking about the one and only Michael Lear, the host of Show Me Murder, a podcast. If you have not caught it on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, you certainly should take the opportunity to do so. Michael worked for 19 years in news radio, first in his hometown, KWIX, our home news station, hometown news station, and it'd be simpler if I'd just read it, KWIX and KRES in Moberly, and then a statewide network, Missouri Net. And for the last 15 years has been presenting tours and studying history of the Missouri State Penitentiary. Bet he's got some stories to share. After a few years off the air, he decided he wanted to do something in the broadcast world again, so he launched Show Me Murder. As he puts it, a history-heavy true crime podcast. And now he's looking into expanding to other media, and he's joining us today on this episode. I've got to tell you, we're going to have a honey dripping over metal voice contest, Michael, I think, before it's all over.
It's your show, so I'll make sure my voice cracks a few times, and or have you on mine, you can do the same. Yeah.
Mine already has.
I'll concede, and I get you on my show, you can concede on mine. That'll be fair.
There's no comparison. But I've wanted to have you on the podcast for a long time, and because I found your let me explain what Show Me Murder is from my perspective. You actually follow, what I love about it is you follow through from the origin all the way through to the ultimate conclusion with the perpetrator because of your connection with the penitentiary. And I think it's just a great piece of storytelling.
Thank you.
You haven't produced a couple any in a while. I want you to get on that horse and kick the spurs to it, because we're all waiting for another episode.
I do too. I've got a script I'm working on now on this very computer. It's actually open in another window here, so I've been making headway just in the last few days. I've got a couple in the works, and I'm happy to say I've got a few people who have wanted to help me with some of the research and that stuff. So that may help them move along a little faster. I always tell people it's a passion project. I always wanted to do this kind of my way, but my way is time consuming.
It's funny you bring that up, but it's something that I've been really wrestling with. I don't want to talk about me, but I really think it's important. Yeah. There's somebody out there that's trying to do what we're doing. I love to write, and I'm a horribly undisciplined writer. And some of the stuff I write is really bad. So I'm not going to be a good writer. But this is the new journalism, regional journalism, as far as I'm concerned. It's the only way to present a wide variety of topics for a regional audience, whether that's the Ozarks or Missouri or whatever. And you've just done some really excellent journalism. And dang it, you beat me to one in my hometown, too, on top of it.
Well, if you're talking about the one I think you're talking about, once I heard of that story, I couldn't resist. I had to write about it.
So, for the uninitiated out there, the little town of Raider, Missouri, which is between Conway and Morgan, which doesn't really mean, Morgan's another town nobody's heard of. But the little town of Raider, Missouri is just a wide spot in the road anymore. Few people live in the area, but it doesn't have a post office, I don't think, anymore. And there was a boxing champion who was on the R.P. Dickerson Ranch out there, and he was murdered. I found this story in when I found it in the Webster County history book. There's a little blurb in it. And then the one that was printed in 1955, I believe, somebody can correct me. But then also Dan Weimer, the editor of the Webster County Citizen, colloquially the Seymour paper, did a big 1 or 2 part series on it about 25 years ago. And that was and honestly, I kind of stayed away from it because I'm like, I don't know what else there is to write. And I hadn't started researching it yet. And then I'm pulling up your stuff while I'm cutting sassafras trees, a big grove of them out there with the chainsaw in like August. And I'm like, oh, wow, he's done it. And so I had to listen. And so tell us a little bit about that story. What led you to it? And then what it's led you to.
And I'm trying to remember what case I was researching at the time, but these stories, one leads into the next. You've done history.
Have friends.
Oh my goodness, the rabbit holes, and those rabbit holes lead to rabbit holes. Well, this was a rabbit hole. I was researching one of the other cases I wrote, and I saw some little blurb about a boxer who had been murdered in Missouri, and I think it referred to him as the middleweight champion. And my first thought, as so often, I find myself saying this a lot, my first thought was kind of dismissive. Well, this must not have been a world heavyweight champion, or surely I would have heard of this case. But sure enough, it was. And the more I dug, like, why haven't I heard of this case? Why haven't I heard of this man who was, he was certainly nationally famous and internationally famous. He was preparing to box overseas. He had found himself squat in the middle of one of the biggest, certainly in the sports world, the biggest sports controversy of the day, with Jack Johnson having won the title and the Great White Hope. Let's take it back. Let's cross the color line. That whole thing, and he was square in the middle of that. And I'm going, this guy was killed in Missouri, and how have I never heard of him? And then I found out, of course, that there was an MSP connection. And, well, I didn't have to learn much before I decided, okay, I have to do this. I want to do this case, if only because I want to know more about it. So, yeah, I was hooked really from that first little snippet that I found. I think was an AP or a Reuters syndicated, it was whittled down to 1 or 2 paragraphs, and that was just enough to get me interested.
Yeah, when I started talking about it, and it was never like just conversing with other local historians and others about it, there was not a lot known. And really, technology has bridged that gap, because we would have never found, you might never found it otherwise.
No, yeah, there's so many things that we can piece together now with so much more ease than anyone could have done even 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, I find that with MSP all the time. And so it's not that there's new information out there, maybe, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just a matter of accessibility.
Well, take us through, my impression of Ketchel was he was probably had been living a wild lifestyle, but he was not an unintelligent man. I don't think you'd describe him as lazy. I think he was industrious. I think he came from industrious people, from the sounds of things.
It sure sounds that way, yeah.
But in light of what we know today, of course, 20 or 30, 10 years ago, we didn't think about head injuries the same way.
Oh my goodness.
What does that, how you were talking about some of those guys going 20 and 30 rounds, and people have to understand they didn't just constantly hit each other during that time. It was more of a dance.
Yeah.
So
yeah. 20 or 30 rounds, and this was a guy who everything you read about him, his fighting style was wide open. He took an inordinate amount of punishment in each match that he fought, and yeah, I don't follow boxing even today. It's not that I don't like it. It's just that it's not one that I've ever followed. But my understanding of boxers today is they'll go certainly months or more between bouts. He was fighting 2 and 3 matches a month, and before he became famous, it had to have been more than that. When he was, tooling along the little mining towns up in, Montana and clear into Canada and then back down, and all these northern states before he'd gone professional. So I mean, what did I say in the episode? I think his actual career was only 7 or 10 years before after he became professional, and how many years before that? But all of those years of just taking beating after beating after beating. But that's what he was known for, was getting back up and finishing a fight and winning,
never fully recovering in
right.
between.
Yeah,
that's where you get the 80-year-old man that's only 40.
Yeah. But
I guess he was smaller. I guess that if you'll take a punch, you can get in and you can flatten somebody. But
I guess he was small and he was quick. He was good at delivering. I think I'm quoting my script here, but I think he was known for delivering powerful blows from the left and right in quick succession. He had some kind of, what they call it, the Ketchel shift at one point. I think it's better known by other names today, but at the time they called it the Ketchel shift, where he would switch his footing and be able to deliver 2 or 3 blows from both sides at basically full strength. I mean, I can barely deliver one that way.
Yeah.
It was fascinating to read about.
That I don't even know that my hips would move around enough. I'd probably fold like a tent.
I guarantee mine won't.
First blow I took. Well, so take us through. We're going to do this a couple different times. But we're going to go down a couple different rabbit holes here. But give us, first of all, if you go to Spotify or Apple, you need to subscribe to Show Me Murder right now. I know a bunch of you are listening to this on your phone. If you're in your car, don't follow this advice. But if you're not doing anything else, go ahead and Show Me Murder. And it's got this cool placard with a skull and a whole bunch of stuff on it. So, well, there it is. A dogwood leaf. Okay, hold on. We'll put it up on social media. It's a dogwood leaf with a skull in the center, and says "Show Me Murder." It has the state of Missouri, and it has what looks to be some gasoline pouring out.
It's a microphone. It's an old style microphone there on the top.
Thought that might be and a key.
And a prison key from MSP, yeah.
Ah, okay.
I'm just egotistical enough to have custom shirts made. I haven't tried selling them yet, but I wanted some for myself.
Well, yeah, I can't decide on a lettering style that I've liked to present the name, because the Wild and Woolly Ozarks lends it very well to the WWO, which then you're competing with the World Wildlife Organization, and so
yeah.
And I'm probably going to do a video on skinning things, so probably not. So anyway, take us through the Ketchel. Take us through the whole Ketchel, kind of what happened when he got to the Dickerson Ranch at Raider,
When he got to the ranch, so I'll back up just a hair to say
and why he was there, probably too, Mike.
Yeah, so he was more or less there. This is 30,000-foot nutshell version, but he was going to rest up. He was going to get back in fighting shape. He wanted to essentially come back at his boxing career, for my personal opinion, and then I think others would say this, for one last go, for one last series of fights. You kind of get the impression that, again, because of that wide open boxing style, the amount of punishment that he took, I think that he sensed he didn't have a lot of years left, but he wasn't done yet, is my opinion. But certainly he had, after the big fight with Jack Johnson, and there are those who contend it wasn't a real fight and this and that and the other, but for what I saw, it took a toll on him from what I saw in the video and my perception of it. And after that fight, and he had, I want to say it was 6 or 7 matches after that with mixed results, I think that he wanted to step out of the ring, like I say, get his feet back under him, work out, get back in fighting shape, and then come out and probably fight a few more matches. There's some evidence he was going to make his first trip to Europe, his first fight overseas. And at the same time, he was buying land in Springfield and with Roland P. Was it Roland or Rollin? I always assumed it was Roland P. Dickerson, but R.P. Dickerson.
I think if you're in the hills, it's Roland, but
okay. I've never heard it pronounced. Yeah.
And that's the whole R.P. Dickerson thing is kind of a story in and of itself. His house is the Snake and Reptile Museum at Dickerson Park Zoo.
Oh, I didn't know it still existed.
Oh, yeah, we'll go. When you're in town, we'll go.
I knew that he had a hand in the zoo. I remember that part, but I didn't know the house was still there. He had caged up
tigers and all kinds of animals at his house.
This guy, and there's a story there to begin with. Yeah.
I don't know, but what he didn't. This is where we should have Richard Crabtree with us. I don't know, but what he didn't have there was a zoo at Phelps Grove Park, and no, I think I've got that backwards. But he had the original old part of the zoo was right behind his house. And when I was a kid, there was always like 3 big cat cages. But he had, this may be post Ketchel, but yeah, I think he also had a house. He maybe had several residences in Springfield.
Yeah.
Over the years.
Okay. It sounds like he's a story in and of himself.
Yeah.
But that's at least my take on why he was at the ranch. And, he was buying, like I said, they were buying land and they were going to start a lumber company that already had, I guess they had a site picked out for it, and there was a letterhead because the letter of his that was in the paper was on the letterhead. So he was preparing to move into the next phase of life. Had a fiance, um, but he was supposed to run this ranch as part of his sort of recouping time. He was going to run this ranch and learn to manage it, and it was on that ranch where he had this encounter with, who ended up being his killer, Goldie, and now I'm blanking on his name.
Walter
Dipley.
Dipley, yeah.
Yeah. And Dipley maintained that that Ketchel and he had already gotten into a couple of dust-ups, and that Ketchel had threatened him. And I always point out, because this is, I take these things seriously. Goldie claimed I think it was at the trial that this first came up, according to what I remember and what there was no allegation of a rape until, I want to say, in the trial it was brought up. And read into that what you will, but I came away with the opinion that I can't say whether it happened or not. And I don't want people to, those are always serious issues to me. I don't want people to think I'm dismissing it. I don't know if one happened or not, but I will say it didn't come up until the trial. So it kind of caught me out of left field when I was already at that point in the case. But suffice to say, this was how Dipley tried to defend what happened. But he ended up getting, I want to say it was a 30-year sentence for murder at MSP.
For quite a while.
Yeah. And Goldie
came back to Webster County.
Did he?
And it was mentioned in the paper. He came back here. But there was if you read some of the papers at the time, I think they took him to Springfield they took him to Springfield, I think, because they were afraid they would lynch him.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of people upset about him getting out, because I think he eventually got his citizenship restored in the whole nine.
Well, I don't know, but what R.P. Dickerson didn't fan that flame.
I'm sure he did. The outrage, I mean.
Yeah. Cobb Shields was sheriff, and I knew his son. In fact, the Cobb and my and I can't think of, and Minnie, and my grandparents and all their kids, etc., all spent Christmases together for years. And Cobb Shields had told my dad all about this story in the late 40s, probably.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was afraid that there were people who wanted Dipley dead bad enough that they'd lynch him, so they took him to Springfield, kept him. And Cobb Shields was by all means an honorable man, and I don't doubt he went up there and had dinner with him, but I don't think he'd have taken any money. Oh, who knows? That's so far removed. Who knows what I know? No. But so it's so funny because I've got 2 or 3 trials, the same personnel, right through them at the same time. So whatever happened to poor old Goldie and Walter?
Well, the last thing that I was able to find about Goldie, and again, I didn't, I'll be honest, on that point, I didn't dig any deeper than newspaper articles. I didn't know who to ask in the Springfield area, so that's kind of where I left it. But the last report of her was that she was widowed. She had married a man in Springfield. I want to say he was a wealthy attorney or something of that nature, but she was living out of a vacant storefront in downtown Springfield. And I think that article was from the time Dipley got out, and basically a reporter sought her down and got her reaction to him getting out. But that was the last mention I found of her, and I did try to track her down, but of course Smith wasn't allegedly even her real name,
right?
So on and so forth. So I'm not sure I was ever able to identify her actual family or who she, where she got married or anything. But that was the last mention I had for her. And then Walter, as I recall, ended up doing some traveling. He got engaged to a woman in Colorado at one point. This is all if memory serves. was it Oklahoma? He found himself in Oklahoma at the end, I think, in his waning years. And
Yeah, he died penniless, but he got involved in some kind of little petty larceny.
little dust up. Yeah, I think he was even accused
Yeah,
of an assault. Maybe he had some
maybe.
more brush ups with the law of a more than misdemeanor nature. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Before the end, and then he, like I say, I believe he died in Oklahoma if I remember right. But he, of course, at MSP. Now there again, I like to tell stories that maybe not all the other guides tell at MSP, but the problem with his story is nobody knows the Stanley Ketchel story to begin with. So if I tell him,
Right.
well, the man who murdered Stanley Ketchel, well, what are you talking about? But I do try to get into some of his exploits at MSP, including he was one of the ringleaders when they held the dining hall in the 30s a couple of different times and got Leslie Rudolph, the warden at the time, all hot and bothered, and he finally sent in the guards and had him crack some skulls and throw people in the
Yeah.
dungeon. And he was one of the ringleaders in that incident. And I've got a photo from that time of a bunch of the inmates. See, at that time, they weren't putting guys in stripes anymore unless they were being punished. The punishment hall inmates, they called them. And it's a picture of the punishment hall inmates after that incident being walked out of what amounted to the main administration building at the time. And they're being walked over to the punishment hall, and it's the ringleaders of that incident. Presumably he's one of the guys in that photo, but their heads are all about that big, and I can't tell which one which one it is. But
Is
that
there
was
any
one
is there any surviving photograph of Dipley?
after the time of the trial, not that I have found.
Okay.
That I never say never. There's probably something out there that I just don't know about yet, or somebody doesn't even know they have. You
Yeah.
know, the time that he entered MSP was before the era of mugshots, so there is no mugshot of him. At least not from MSP. So yeah, the last photo I've got of him is actually the one that, now here's another Roland Dickerson, R.P. Dickerson exploit, but he got a hold of a photo that had the caption, you know, the killers of Walter Dipley, and rounded up some of the law enforcement in Webster County and said, hey, come on out, we'll watch the footage of the Jack Johnson fight. And of course, that photo was at the end of it. And, you know, identifying these two, the killers, well, this is before the trial has happened. And
Yeah.
the controversy there was, well, these are the men who are going to go out and pick the jury. And so that's where it was like, okay, you're trying to sway the men who will be going out and bringing in potential jurors. And so that was seen as him trying to influence a trial. And he tried in many other ways. But that's really the only photo I've got of Dipley, is that photo of him and Goldie together that was shown on newsreels, and then he tried to include it in that effort.
Okay. So what's happened with you in regard to that case? Because you released that, what, about 2 years ago?
I think it's been about that, yeah.
2 or maybe a little more.
Had a blast recording that case, and so since then, you know, it kind of sat on the back burner for a while. There were a few follow-ups I wanted to do. I wanted to come down to your neck of the woods and see what there is to see related to it. I want to go up one of these days. I want to get up to the Twin Cities and visit his grave and his statue. But I had an opportunity fall into my lap here. Oh, I guess it was about in January. I was asked to present at the Missouri Conference for History, and I hadn't presented that case live yet, so I decided that's the one I'm going to use. And the difficulty was I had 20 minutes. Well, you may not remember the runtime of that episode, but it was an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I had to do something that I am loath to do, and that is shorten my script. I hate taking things out. But I managed to
That's
fit
like
in
the comedian that finds out he's got 5 minutes on Carson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
Yeah.
4.
Yeah. Yeah. But I decided to focus on the Jack Johnson portion of it. And I was able to whittle that down to 20 minutes and use it as, you know, another plug. Hey, if you want to hear the full version, go to Show Me Murder. But yeah, that allowed me a chance to dust it off again. And It's such a fascinating case, and Ketchel was a fascinating individual. He's one of the few people I've written about that I can honestly say I'd like to have met.
Yeah. I
You
bet
there's
that's right.
yeah, I mean there's a lot of people that I write about that I think, I would not get along with this person. I don't know if I would have gotten along with Ketchel per se, but I'm interested enough that I'd like to have known what he was like in person and not through the lens of sports writers and critics and his opponents and all these other people that talked about him, because one of the fascinating things about him is he fed all that, what do you want to call it, propaganda, all the legends and
Sure.
everything. He didn't play it down. He didn't deny it. He would add to it at every chance he got.
He'd read dime novels.
Yeah, that's part of the thing that I think is so fascinating about him is he struck me as this kind of romantic character at heart. I mean, there was mentions of him tearing up at a sad song, or if he started thinking about his mother. He'd rile himself up before he'd go into a fight with a guy by imagining that this guy had offended his mom. And so, I mean,
It sounds so quaint today.
Right? Yeah. But there was a sentimental side to him. Yeah.
So, well, so you've got several on Show Me Murder that are series. There's one on the 1954 Missouri Penitentiary riot.
Yeah.
And then there's another one on Missouri's latest lynching, I guess, Kenneth Rex McElroy in the town of Skidmore, Missouri.
Oh, yeah.
A killing that came years and years too late.
Mm-hmm.
If that had been in Ozark County or Douglas County or Webster County or Shannon County, somebody killed him 2 decades before. Called it a good day's work and went on.
Every once in a while, I hear about another similar situation. Things like that still play out even today, believe it or not.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
Yeah,
I don't doubt it.
We like to think that all this awful stuff is in our past, but
oh Lord, no.
Yeah.
But so, I wanted to share with the listener. Once again, go ahead and subscribe to Show Me Murder. Michael probably presents, in my opinion, there's a lot of true crime 30 to 50 minute segments that are out there on this and that. His on Kenneth Rex McElroy is probably the best I've heard.
Thank you.
He, like me, first heard of this case on was it CBS?
I was thinking about that the other day. I think it was, but it was certainly one of the big three.
CBS, where Brian Dennehy played a character based on Kenneth Rex McElroy called what do you call him?
I thought he called it McElroy. I thought it was taken straight from the book, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
But I know his attorney, who later became Attorney General of Missouri, had his name not exactly explicit in it.
Yeah.
But I encourage you to go listen to those. Tell us what that was like, because you've got like 5 hours on it. 4.5.
I remember that case being, I remember how mad that made me watching that movie as a kid. And that movie, I now know, pulled so many punches. And certainly there were probably elements of it that I didn't understand or appreciate as a kid. That when, and credit where credit is due. Most of my book is straight from my podcast is straight from In Broad Daylight with Harry McLean, who was very graciously agreed to let me do that. Just basically pull from his book and write my episode around that. And that ended up being, I think that was the second episode I wrote. So I was still kind of trying to find the voice of the podcast, but I thought this is, as Missouri true crime goes, there's no maybe better case that I can be leading off with in my first batch. The Greenlease kidnapping was another one, but it left such an impression on me as a kid. But boy, when I started going through that book, there were a number of times, and especially, I mean, I had other things going on in my life that were stressing me out at that time too. There were a number of times that I had to walk away from writing that, walk away from reading it, because the things that he did to other people and essentially got away with, if it doesn't make you mad, I sometimes say this on tours, if it didn't make you mad, I don't know what to do with you. I don't,
Yeah.
The man was sociopathic, narcissistic. Yeah, I mean, God, I hope I never meet anybody like that. And I know they exist, but
Well, you can have a sociopathic, narcissistic person who's a pain in the ass, but doesn't really hurt anything. This guy was like on. That's the personality type that leads to some of history's most horrible people.
yeah,
If employed for evil.
yeah.
But I think it's a great series, and I think your take on it is one of the best. Well,
Thank you.
folks, when we're going to take a little break here, and when we get back, probably Michael and I are going to cook up something in the intermediate here. But we get back, we're going to have Michael tell us more about the history of MSP and tour guiding, and maybe he's got a story or two to share that'll be a little creepy. I know it's not Halloween, but hey, I can't resist. So check out this word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the Wild and Woolly Ozarks. I'm sitting here continuing our conversation with Michael Lear. Michael, talk to us about some of your work at Missouri State Prison, not the current one where they house folks, but the old abandoned, bloodiest 40 acres in America. That one.
I remember writing about that place when it closed in 2004. I was, let's see, how old would I have been in 2000? I don't feel like doing math, but I was, I think I was still working overnight news at that time, and writing up just a little article on the historic prison closed. And I remember writing it and thinking, man, I'd love to get in there just once, and I thought it would never happen. 7 years later, I moved to Jeff City to take a radio job, and I knew some of the guys who were just starting that year the ghost tours. They had been doing history tours a couple of years, and they were just starting to do the paranormal tours at MSP, and they said, hey, we need another guide. Get your application in. And I did, and here we are going on 16 years later. I'm still doing tours there.
Wow.
I at that point in my life, I don't know if I remembered how much I enjoyed history, except to occasionally watch it on the History Channel. That was my favorite channel back when it still showed history.
Yeah. I look at some of those. I remember thinking the one thing about there was an episode I really loved on the Medici family. It was a series on the Medici. It's called Godfathers of the Renaissance. And I look back at that now and I'm like, oh, we have such better storytelling available just on YouTube.
Yeah. That's where the stuff we used to watch on the History Channel, on the Learning Channel and Discovery and all that, that's where it is now, is on YouTube.
Yeah. And it's sort of an unfiltered conversation in that if you want to talk about the aliens and the aliens, if you want to talk about the pyramids and somebody brings up aliens, okay, fine. You may not believe in that, but let them pull their theory out. We'll have all the theories out there. That's what I love about this time we live in.
Yeah. But anyway, that's where it began. I did the ghost tours for a number of years, and more and more I was getting into I made sure to take all the history guides tours, got to know very well Mark Schreiber, who, I need to take a moment and talk about Mark. First of all, he worked at MSP starting in 1968 and worked there a total of 42 years. When he left, he was the deputy warden. He had been a crime scene investigator for Cole County, which is Jeff City's in Cole County. And so even when he wasn't directly maybe working at the prison, he was covering crimes there and investigating crimes there, working for the sheriff's department and the prosecutor and so on. He's the one who really got started the research of that history as we know it today. He wrote 3 books on it. He got those tours going. There very well may not be any of those buildings left standing if not for Mark Schreiber. Wow. And we lost him. He and I great honor to call him a friend. I did get to know him before, he passed in November. And so that's been rough for all of us at MSP to lose him. Mm. But it's also been, I think there are several of us who have taken it upon ourselves to, my God, we're going to keep this going. We're going to keep working on the research. We're going to keep the tours going. And, you might here and there see me post on a.
So was there a question at one time whether those buildings were going to be like torn down, like the prison facility, or who's the custodian of it now?
So the state still owns the buildings that we go in on the tours. Of the, when we say the 47 acres of that site, sections of it still belong to the state. Some sections have been given to the city, and they've, so what has been torn down is on sites that, to my knowledge, all belong to the city, Jeff City at this point. Ostensibly, the answer to your question is no. There was a master plan put in place before the prison closed that essentially called for saving the 4 most historic buildings, those being the ones that we go in on the tours. So that's 3 housing units and the gas chamber. Wow. But over the years, I may get myself in trouble if I say too much here, but I'll be honest, over the years, there's been a lot of doubt as to the long-term saving of those buildings and how secure that really was, and that master plan that was put in place in 2004, that, I guess we're still operating off of a variation of that, but the original master plan kind of went out the window, and now there's, as tour guides and as historians, we're very much unsure of what's going to happen from one day to the next. There was a building torn down here a couple of summers ago that, frankly, we'd been hearing, they're going to start tearing it down next month for like 3 years. And then it finally happened. And then we were told, at least I was told that certain sections of the wall were going to be saved. And then lo and behold, I showed up for a tour last summer and they were gone. So if only for me personally, there's been a lot of uncertainty. And I know I'm not alone in that, but maybe we come to it for different reasons. There are efforts being made to try and ensure the long-term stability of that site. And if I had to put money on it, I would say that at least for the time being, the plan is to preserve it. But, we had a tornado in 2019 that hit the oldest building on the site, an 1868 cell block called A Hall, took the roof off of it. We thought that was it then. We thought we might lose that building. It is to the credit of our tour guests and to the Visitors Bureau. Tour proceeds put that roof back on, or we would have lost that building. And that was that was $750,000. How many more times we can do that, I don't know. But so that's kind of where we are now. And from a history standpoint, a historian's standpoint, I want to see it all saved. From the standpoint of a realist, I get it. It's not that simple. But I look at some of the other state historic sites that are preserved and say this has a greater role in the overall state's history and national history than many of the things we are saving now. And I'm not, I'm not trying to pit, one thing against the other, in that I want to see them all saved. Yeah. But I think that there are there are factors at play here that maybe have worked against us over the last number of years, but I will say that I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll see some positive development, maybe even in the next year or two.
Well, that's good to hear. How many visitors a year come in and take a prison tour?
We have done, I think the lowest number that I'm aware of is 26,000 since I've been doing it. And typically it's more in the 30 to 33,000 a year range. And so this is, here again, history nut. I'm not bashing Alcatraz, but if we compare the two, I often hear that Alcatraz does more than 1 million visitors a year. And that may be true. And, it's got its own unique history and so on and so forth. But if we're talking about a historic prison, MSP was open about 130 years longer.
Mm-hmm.
Number of inmates is nowhere near. I mean, MSP, the most it ever held in a one day was, and you'll read other numbers online, but I'm convinced this is right, 4,773. The max population at Alcatraz, I want to say was something like 300.
It was tiny.
Yeah, and I'm told it never hit 300.
Yeah, it was tiny compared to there's no comparison at all. And quite frankly, if you were a hoodlum post-Civil War and west of the Mississippi, chances are you visited because everybody came through Missouri.
Everybody came through Missouri. That was the first prison west of the Mississippi.
And when you consider that what we would consider today petty larceny would land you a year in the penitentiary.
Yeah.
The chances were pretty good.
So again, not at all to bash Alcatraz. It is historically significant for its own reasons. But if you want to talk about sites that could be pulling more visitors than they are, MSP, I mean, and I don't know what, I'm not in a position to whatever it may be, the advertising and promotion, the upkeep, I don't know what. I'm not pointing my finger at anybody and saying something's holding us back, but I think that given the chance, that site will only continue to grow, and I think it could rival a lot of the more famous historic sites in the nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's your favorite part of the tour? What's your favorite part that you like to tell people about? Or we want them to come up and take your tour, Mike. So save something for the tour, but
sure,
give us a couple of gems if you would.
And I'll try to think of specific ones here, but in a general sense, you've heard the podcast. The things that I love to throw into tours and the podcasts and all of this stuff is those aha moments. Those "are you kidding me?"
Right.
The things that really get the crowd to go, "You're making this up." Off the top of my head, I hate to tell that story in its entirety. Here, I'll tell you this one. So one of the things that I have done since, for multiple reasons, the prison tours, the podcast, my former job at Missouri Net, is tour our current correctional facilities and go meet with inmates for one reason or another. And just a few months ago, I went and met with a guy who was at MSP from, I want to say it was 64 to 98. When they built Potosi, they moved him to Potosi in 98. So he was there a good 30-some-odd, 34-ish years. And this was one of the legends of that last third of MSP's life, Lawrence Marola. Somewhere along the line over the years, he acquired the nickname MacGyver. The exploits that are tied to him at one point or another in his career. At one point, he made a crossbow that fired rebar as its bolts, as its ammunition. The story I was told was that he planned to use it to skewer a guard on the tower and use that guard's body as an anchor to climb up and over the wall. He didn't tell me that much when I sat down and talked to him. He didn't. If that was the plan, he never told me that. But he told me where to find one of the parts of that crossbow that he suspects they never bothered to take from where he had hidden it in the attic, and when they eventually found it. But it was essentially according to him, it was essentially a railroad tie. And so he suspects, and if that's true, I bet it is still up there
Wow.
in the attic of one of the buildings. He was known for hiding in the attic of that building. He'd crawl back and forth and talk to his buddies on the top tier of cells on the other end of the cell block and then come back. I'm trying to think. There was one other exploit that I'm forgetting.
Sounds kind of like Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah. And it does. If you didn't work there, maybe, because, I mean, you talk to guys who were COs there, and some of this was probably scary stuff at the time.
Oh, I bet it was terrifying.
Right.
What had he done to get in prison?
Oh, well, he was in for the murder of a police officer in Kansas City. And he wouldn't want to hear me say this, I'm sure. He goes for parole every few years, but I don't think he'll ever get out. But he made gunpowder on one occasion just to prove that he could do it, and did successfully set it off. And some of these stories, by the way, are, it's stuff that he confirmed. Other stories that various correction staff have told me about him. I found a newspaper article where he and another guy had dug through the floor of one of the cells in that old 1868 building and struck the dungeons, which at the time were walled off. And I'm told there was a long period when people didn't know those dungeons were there because they enclosed it and put a shower in on the outside. Well, he managed to strike that area, not knowing it was there. And, of course, the newspaper article, the warden said, well, they were digging an escape tunnel. And I sat down talking to Larry, and I pulled this article out and said, no, wasn't an escape tunnel. We just wanted a wine cellar. We just wanted someplace to brew our hooch.
Oh, yeah.
But the story that I'm leading up to that always gets everyone's attention is he built a hang glider, which I love. I love how he told me that. The idea came from around the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and they were talking about people who were using hang gliders and little powered, essentially powered wings, or what do they call those little? The name's escaping me now, but those little single-person airplanes look about like a kite with a seat underneath it.
Yeah. Like an ultralight or...
Ultralight, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what gave him the idea, was people using those to go over the wall in Berlin before the wall came down. But he said I'm asking him about this, and I'm trying to get him to tell me the story, and he says, well, that wasn't the original idea. The original idea was the hot air balloon. And they were going to construct a hot air balloon, he and a couple other guys, and float over the wall. And they got so far as ordering the silk to make the envelope. See, a lot of these, a couple of the big escape attempts at MSP over the years were by guys who they themselves or somebody who was willing to help them were a convict, an inmate who was on one of the maintenance teams there, maintenance crews. And some of these guys had the ability to add things to purchase orders. Okay. And so this is how he managed to get, I don't remember how many cubic feet of silk he said it was, ordered and brought into the prison, and again stashed, he said, in the attic of that same building with the intention of making a hot air balloon. And somewhere along the line, they decided to scrap that plan and go with the hang glider instead. And according to him, he got so far as to get this wing up to the edge of one of the housing units there, and he was, getting ready to push off, and he's looking down over the side from essentially 5 floors up, and he couldn't bring himself to go on over the side. Was as far as he got.
Wasn't there a POW story, a British POW story about them making a hang glider and escaping?
I think so. Yeah.
I'm positive I've seen that on PBS or something.
That sounds very familiar. Yeah. Now that you say that.
I wonder if he encountered that story.
I wonder. And, for all these, I always say this all the time. I did not work there. I didn't do time there. Everything that I can tell people about is from talking to people who were there.
Sure.
Maybe this is all them pulling my leg, but you know what? A dozen people have independently pulled my leg about this story having actually happened. So it either actually happened or it's a very good story. But
Well, so one would lead me to believe that if a fella built a hang glider to escape from a state prison, that something of that nature might make the news. I mean, we've got a picture of um Tim Robbins' little hammer
mm-hmm.
from Shawshank.
Yeah, yeah,
Tim Robbins?
yeah,
Yeah, Tim
yeah,
Robbins.
yeah,
Played Otter. Okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's Tim Matherson played Otter.
Oh yeah, too many Tims. Tiny Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
I'm
I'm glad that we've seen a lot of the same movies. This makes it easy.
But some of his exploits did make the newspapers, like that incident where he was digging through the floor.
If there's a photograph or a story about the hang glider.
You never know. There are things that I didn't think I'd ever see, and then lo and behold, there they were. So I hold out hope. That's and that's one of the great things about that prison. I'll never run out of stuff to research. I'll never stop finding stuff on it.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I'm sure you won't.
Yeah.
I'm sure you won't. So, what was the guy's name again?
Larry Lawrence Marola.
And where is Larry Lawrence Marola today?
He is in Bonne Terre, which is one of the state's maximum security facilities.
And how old is he?
Oh my goodness. I want to say that he was probably around 20 when he went in the 60s. I'm going to say early 20s.
Okay, so he could be in his 70s, maybe 80s.
I would say he's around 80, just off the top of my head. But he's just one of the characters.
So you have more, I take it. Has he done anything lately? Has he done anything within the last 20 years, or has he tried to escape?
I don't that I'm aware of, no. But then again, A, most of my research is focused on MSP, and B,
Sure.
Anything that he's done in the last 20 or 30 years, the nature of news coverage of incidents in prisons has changed, certainly over the course of my lifetime. Mm-hmm. You notice you don't see now. Maybe this is my perception, but I don't think you see the word riot in news anymore. And I don't think that means we don't have riots in not just this state, but in this country. I think that word is just something that they don't want that word getting out, no matter what kind of incident they're having. But if you talk to people who, on either side of the bars, if you talk to corrections staff, if you talk to people who are incarcerated, they'll tell you there are still riots, and we hear about some of them. But that's one example of, if he's done anything in the last 20 or 30 years, that's the way things that happen in prisons are reported is not the same. And any kind of record that, his punishment record, his incident log, will certainly remain unavailable to me, at least until he dies. And probably, I want to say it's for some 20 or 30 years after that. So that's not to say he hasn't done anything, but he's certainly been in a different caliber of prison than MSP since 1989.
Sounds like it.
MSP was kind of a sieve for all its legend.
Yeah. Well, what's give us another one. I'm not going to just stop at one.
One thing that often raises eyebrows, I think, is obviously when you start talking about the gas chamber and you think of all these sobering conversations and the sobering subject matter you can have about that, and fully acknowledging the serious nature of that place, but then some of the stories that circulate it, like the man who helped build the gas chamber when he was in for, I want to say it was armed robbery, got out, committed the murder of an unrequited love, and sent back and executed in the building he helped build. There was one man who was executed for he and another guy got in an argument over who was the better pitcher. And that was the crux of their argument. Of course, they were both drunk, but he essentially killed a man in a fight over which one of them was a better ball player. There was the man who, and I've done a podcast episode on Claude McGee, but when you
Right.
visit the site, he committed the murder that got him executed within sight of the gas chamber, which
I
think
listened to that one, but I don't remember the details of it.
he
I remember
yeah.
Was Claude the one that has the unique picture?
Yes. Yeah. He's the one whose photo stands out among the 40 down there because everybody looks at it and they think he's crazy. And maybe he was. I came away from it thinking at least it was more to it than that. Hell, I think I'm crazy, but I don't think that that's all I am.
You seem rather functional to me.
We're good at that. But I think about little details like that he was inside of the gas chamber when he committed this murder. When we talk about the dungeons in Housing Unit 4, when they finally quit using those dungeons around 1931 or 32, and that's the best I've been able to narrow it down, for a number of years right after that, that was a store where inmates could go buy cigarettes and candy. And I think about this guy who knows his buddy just starved to death in one of those cells 6 months ago, but I'm going to go down there now and buy my licorice. And it makes me think about what did it do to a person to live in that prison, even for a number of months, let alone years or decades.
Mm-hmm.
And how did it change them? Because I think some of those little details, I like to throw those in, if only to try to get people to think about how this place affected not only the inmates who were there, but the staff.
Sure.
When we talk about prisoners who were sometimes whipped with a leather strap up to 99 times, average person off the street is not going to be able to do that job. And maybe when they took that job as a prison guard, they weren't able to do that job. So what happened to them over however long, right? There's so much that, when I say there's so much that prison can teach us, those are some of the things that I'm thinking of when I say that. Empathy. It sounds strange to people, but that prison and the history of it has taught me more about empathy than I think anything in my life ever has. And that sounds like such a strange statement, but I think it's true. And I think that's one of the things that it can teach the rest of us.
I think it's very understanding. I think when you deal, and let's face it, there was the guy who our friend Cameron Lee talks about, for our listeners, episode 2, the Quail Hunter, Jack the Quail Hunter Kennedy, the last train robber in Missouri, who got thrown in there on some little swindling deal or something, and wrote just how bad it was in the early 1900s, like 1904 or 1905.
Yeah, they're about, yeah.
And I read some of that, and I'm like, ugh, I don't know that and then I was listening to yours today on the food in the women's prison, when you were talking about Goldie,
yeah,
Ripley, or Goldie Smith, or whatever her name was. And I was like,
I keep coming back to, because you still get guys on tours who will say, well, we should still be treating people like that. That's what we should be doing to them today. And I know not everybody, I was raised Catholic. I still am, the basis of my faith is still a Christian faith. I am Christian. And I always come back to this sentiment. I'm not good at getting some of these quotes right or quoting the Bible, but how we treat the lowest among us says more about us than it does certainly them.
Right.
And whether you're talking about children, whether you're talking about the elderly, those who are incarcerated certainly would be among the lowest among us. Mm-hmm. And something that COs have said to me time and time again, and Mark said it, and other correction staff have said to me time and time again, we're not here to punish them. We're here to hold them. We're here to make sure that their punishment is carried out. But we're not here to essentially torture them, is what they were often subjected to in different periods in history. And again, I try to make sure that I point this out, and I don't do it often enough, that it isn't just it's not just the incarcerated for whom I feel empathy, because again, a lot of staff suffered in their own way there too. My God, if we had been monitoring mental health 100 years ago the way we
Right.
do today, can you imagine what they would have found on both sides of the
Oh, yeah.
bars in that prison?
Yeah.
And so there again, when people ask me why do I think that place needs to be saved, I never quite know how to put it succinctly, but I think that's one of the biggest things that place can teach us is about empathy and about how we treat the lowest among us. And I mean, we've come a long way in some ways in our treatment of prisoners and our treatment of people with mental health issues and so, but in some ways we really haven't. We've still got a lot to learn. And so for all the reasons that history can be valuable, especially in those veins, that's top of my list of why I think that place should be saved. It'll be one thing they tear it down, and 20 years from now, somebody might see a book in a library and might decide to pick it up, as opposed to how many people come to that prison to have a good time and enjoy themselves, but maybe learn a thing or two while they're there.
Sure.
It's a big difference.
Very well said. Very well said, Mike. So I'm going to have to ask, what's the creepiest thing that's happened to Mike Lear?
Creepiest thing that's happened.
Because it was a ghost tour. That's the thing. Originally, it was a ghost tour, right?
It still is. We still have both. We still do both. But for me personally, I started off doing the ghost tours, and little by little, I got to be more of the history. Now I'm almost strictly history, but we still do both. And I still make it a point to go jump onto a ghost hunt or a ghost tour here and there. There was a section. I'll try to be brief. There's a section in the
This isn't broadcast TV.
I ramble.
We can go a little longer if we need to.
You can imagine the people who run the tours get so aggravated with me because I'm notorious for going over. But and to be fair, I do
Get their money's worth.
McClung Hall is a building that dates back to 1914-18, built in sections, but there's a section of it that a number of the historians, Mark and I and several others, believe the lowest level of that building actually dates back to the old B Hall. So that building, one of its names is B and C Hall. The old B Hall before it was from 1857, 1859 it was being built. Though that was one of the cell blocks being built during a period when the cells were only 4 feet wide.
Ooh.
And I could go into a long explanation, but the gist of it is they wanted one man to a cell. The first two buildings both had cells that were 14 by 8. And of course, trying to do one man to a cell, those fill up real quick. And so they went to this design with these narrow cells so they could fit more into the same amount of space. So for 1840, 1860, and then for a good 30, almost 40 years, they were building buildings with 4 foot wide cells, and that was why. They tore that building down to make way for the current building that you can tour today, McClung Hall, but we have all for many of years believed that the lowest level of that building was repurposed from the old B Hall. And one of the reasons we think that is, up until the 80s, those cells were 4 foot wide. One of them, when they remodeled them, was the odd one out, and it's still the original dimensions of about 4 by 7. So we think this unit dates back to the 1860s, and that's assuming there wasn't a building on that spot before it. That level was locked off to us as tour guides for up until I think it was 2013. They finally gave us permission to go into that unit. For whatever reason, the state, tells us where we can and can't go. That unit was off limits until one night in 2013. I was doing a tour, and I got a text from my tour schedule. Hey, we can go in 3D now, or O Hall, but I think she called it 3D as one of its other names. I was in the middle of a tour, and we get this text, and so of course, as soon as my tour was over, the assistant on that tour that night, Lisa, who still works at the tours, she and I immediately went down to that unit. By God, we're going to check it out. And we went
Right.
down. We went down there. We went all through it, and both sides, kind of horseshoes one side around to the other. We went through the whole unit. We went down this maintenance tunnel. Now today, that maintenance tunnel is locked off, and there's particulate matter coming off the ceiling. God knows what's in that. I actually think it, until they remediate it anyway, it should be locked off. But it wasn't that night. And we went back in that unit, or in that maintenance hall. It runs between the backs of the cells. It's basically a plumbing chase. And we're standing about 6 or 7 feet apart, and we hear what sounded to me like somebody with a voice a hand over their mouth, and their voice muffled, like they're going, like they're trying to call for help.
Wow.
We both heard it. We both caught it on our audio recorders, and it sounded like it came from in between us. And that is the single creepiest thing that I have experienced at MSP, and that's, I almost want to say far and away. I've had a lot of experiences there, but that's the only one that's ever creeped me out. Most of the things that happen there, first of all, most of the time that I've had an experience there, I didn't know that something had happened, sometimes for days later, until I could talk to somebody else, and they'll say something, and I'll say, well, wait a minute, I don't remember that.
Mm-hmm.
One good example of that is we think there's something there that mimics the staff. One might call it a doppelganger, although that has heavier connotations if you really read it in the mythology. But certainly it seems to mirror, like, people have heard my voice when I'm not even on the site. To my knowledge, no one's ever seen me when I'm not there, but a couple of the other staff have been seen when they're on a totally different part of the site. And so it might be days later that somebody says, hey, when you were up here, and well, I wasn't up there. And a lot of the experiences that I've had are like that, to where you don't know it sometimes for hours or days later.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's
Wow.
it's fascinating sometimes to hear about, you saw me doing what? You heard, but a lot of the stuff that I've have experienced has been audible, but there have been a few visual things. But man, hearing that voice that night, that sounded like somebody in distress right between us.
Yeah, and you, yeah, something wanted you to think that anyway,
Yeah.
whether it was or not. I got a question, and of
Sure.
course we're going to go off script here, but I used to, well, you don't know, but I used to drive to Columbia frequently for work. And as you cross through Jefferson City
Mm-hmm.
and head down and cross the bridge, and you head back west on the other side of the river, and then head up north into Columbia, there's that old, what I understand was the old women's prison off there in the
Mm-hmm.
field, and it just sits there.
Yeah, I know
And
exactly what you're talking about.
Does anyone own? I guess someone has to own it, but I mean, what's the story on that? Do they give tours of that? Has anyone ever done any research on it? Because I know it's been closed for like,
I think the '93 flood is what finally finished it off. I don't think they ever put anybody back in it after the flood of '93. That is the Renz, R-E-N-Z, Renz Prison Farm.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of several inmate-run farms. Essentially, these were satellites off of MSP. And some of them later became full-on correctional facilities. That one was actually considered a women's prison at one point. I think they actually called it the Renz Correctional Center or Correctional Facility. But it started off as Prison Farm number 2. And there was about, I want to say that one was on the order of about 700 to 800 acres down there on the river bottoms that was farmed by inmates. And later on, it was treated like an auxiliary prison. That's where the truck James Earl Ray escaped on was going with a load of bread the morning he escaped. That's where that truck was going, was to Ren's farm. Appears that he never made it that far. He jumped off of it before it got there.
Now, just for the listener, James Earl Ray, the assassin of Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King, yes.
Did some time at MSP.
before Martin Luther King was killed. He was on the run from
Yeah.
MSP when MLK was murdered, and that was the night, the morning he escaped. That's where that truck was going that he was hiding on the back of.
Wow.
But Wren's Farm was named for Paul Renz, who was the director of the prison's farm program for a number of years. And so that's where the name came from. But that was just one of several. You know, the prison farms at one point, it was in excess of 8,000 acres, mostly in the immediate Jeff City area that was being farmed by inmates. And so that was one of them. I'm trying to remember the time frame here, but certainly I'm going to say it was mid 70s, I believe, that was co-ed for a while. Literally half of the prison was women, half of the prison was men. People tell me about them having dances and band concerts and things.
Just getting ready to ask.
Baseball and softball game. Right. Yeah. Stuff that today people, no, that didn't, they would have baseball games and stuff out there. And then for a while it was strictly women, and that's what many people, when they refer to the women's prison, that's what they're remembering. There for a while it was only women, and I think it might have been. Well, I'm not going to say that. I'm not sure if it was holding men or women at the time the flood hit in '93, and of course that whole field all the way up to and including the highway was underwater for probably a couple of months. I lived north at the time, but I would wager a couple of months. And it never reopened after that.
And probably wasn't worth rebuilding. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. No, you're fine. But it's been, pictures there is a really good photo album online. I think it's still out there, of someone who had gone essentially urban exploring through it and taken us, I'm going to say 30 or 40 photos of it, including a huge tree that's washed up in the boiler room from the flood that's never been removed, and silt piled up on it. But so there are people who have documented it and people who have been out there. It is on private property now, and I'm told that if you know the right person, you can get in there and check it out. But to date, I don't know who that person is. I've not been in it. People ask me all the time about trying to get out there. I know the property owners don't, they don't take kindly to trespassing. And some people maybe a little more lax about it, but this is a family who is not. And the building itself, I think, is in and that's part of the reason the building itself is in pretty sketchy shape. And so there's a huge liability question.
Well, that, and if you have one or two start, pretty soon the whole town's going to be out there.
Right.
It's you as a property owner, you just end up having to be an asshole at some point. There's nothing else to do.
Yeah, don't fault them at all. I would love to get in there and check it out sometime, but that's the story behind the rough story behind the Wren's prison farm.
Well, Mike, how can people, obviously they can come up and take a tour with you, and they can follow you on, Show Me Murder. How else can they keep track of what you're up to? And what other things do you have coming up?
So let me say this. First of all, Show Me Murder has a Facebook and an Instagram page. Love to hear from people on there. I'm a terrible self-promoter. It occurs to me I never put up my tour schedule for April, but I will usually month to month put my tours as I get it, put my tour schedule up. If and all the guides are great, but if you want one of mine, that's one place you can often find what I'm going to be doing tours. And you can just send me a message there. That's one easy way to get in touch with me, is send me a message on Show Me Murder, Instagram and Facebook. I'm working on. Let's say I'm working on one book now, but I've got plans for at least 3. And I'm sure there'll be more. But one of the books that I want to write is just going to be kind of a hodgepodge of different individuals or significant events at MSP that maybe don't merit a book on their own, but it'll make a good collection.
Sure.
One of them is going to focus on the children at MSP. There were
Oh,
mothers who had babies there, mothers who got pregnant while they were there, mothers who, back in the days when you don't separate mother and child under any reason, a judge would send mom to prison and say, you can take your children with you. And in his mind, that was an act of mercy. And so sometimes mom would show up at prison with a baby, and sometimes they'd turn her away and essentially pardon her, and sometimes they wouldn't. And that's not counting, that I haven't counted yet, but I would wager that I've probably seen a dozen to maybe up to 20, 15-year-olds at various points in that prison's history, the different registers and records I've looked at. There's probably 15 to 20, 15-year-olds, and at least that many 16 and 17-year-olds, probably far more. But there was, and I don't know how many 14-year-olds, but there was one 13-year-old sent to that prison in 1940. And so he'll be one of the guys that I feature in that. But I want to talk about the youth and the prison and the children who were at MSP, and what that was like. And so that's the subject of another book. And then the other one I know I have ideas for others, but the other one I know I want to do right now is by a guy who was there from 1883 to 1900, J.B. Firebug Johnson. Famously said to have done 17 years in the dungeon. Now, all due respect to anybody who says that, I've read his book. He was in the dungeon for a weekend. And he very explicitly says he was in the dungeon for, about a day and a half one weekend, and then they put him in solitary. And I always stress to people, I'm not being dismissive. Solitary is no joke. But it is different. But he was in solitary confinement in that prison for 17 years at the end of, before the turn of the last century.
wow.
And he's another good example of a lot of his exploits that he describes in that book, which first of all are evidence that he wasn't in a dungeon because he was involved in too many things and knew about too many things that he never would have known about had he been in the dungeon. He also would have been blind. But a lot of his exploits are verifiable through newspaper articles and other media at the same time. And so I had this idea, let's take his book and do basically an annotated version of it and go through and, okay, well, here's what he's talking about. Here's what building he was in. So that's sure. Another thing that I'm going to do, that there might be a whole 6 people on the planet who are history nuts enough to actually read that, but by God, I'm going to do it.
Well, it sounds like sounds fascinating to me.
I can't wait. I did the basis for it a couple of years ago, just trying to get a better read on him and some of the myths around him. But about halfway through it, I thought I should make this consumable.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was going to say about the children born up there. I bet 9 months after one of those co-ed dances, you might have a few.
It's hard for me to imagine how on earth.
I mean, they go to such great extent to keep men and women separate in prison. It must have been a really low security.
Certainly compared to MSP, it absolutely was. It was a very different environment. Yeah.
I wonder if the people hooked up. I mean, honestly, like, he was a prisoner. I was a prisoner. Hey, we went to this dance. We got along. He got paroled that spring, went and got a house. I got out that following fall, and we started a family.
So little of that is outside the realm of possibility. The more and more, I mean, maybe most people would assume that could happen to begin with, but the more I learn about this place's history, the more of that stuff that, yeah, I'm sure something like that did happen. I was reading the other day about a guy who was an inmate there who turned around as soon as he got out and became a guard. They hired him to be a CO after he'd been a prisoner there. I would have thought that's a terrible idea, but it happened. And that's one of the chapters. The first book I referenced, it's going to be a collection of stories, is going to be about the guy who I first heard about him when I found out, again, stumbled across an article. This inmate had gotten out, was on the run for a while. When they caught him, he had gotten married while he was out. And I thought that was odd enough until I found out that was only the first time he had done that. Because a number of years later, he escaped and he got married again to a different gal while he was on the run. I thought, what kind of charmer is this? But
moves quick.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can't tell you that those things happen at Ren's, but I can tell you it's absolutely plausible. And that's the thing, too.
I just have them all taking their tin cans by the punch bowl, and I just have some imagery there that I'd like to play with a bit. Well, I tell you what, folks, Michael, it's been a pleasure. This is going to be a killer episode for our, no pun intended on the murder title, but this is going to be one our listeners are surely going to enjoy. Folks, if you get a chance, go up and take that tour from Michael, and I'm sure when we have him back in the future, hint, hint, Michael Lear, that he'll be here with a book, or maybe books. And maybe it won't take that long because we'll probably find something else to talk about. So thank you all for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your support, your kind words. We appreciate you sharing and giving us those reviews. I'm up to 2 5-star reviews. Keep them coming, folks. So, Mike, we appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. And, folks, you all be careful. And, boys, if you would, please be good to the tourists. Bye now.